Hey, it's Thomas here, and today we're doing a quick review on the E-Marco 400 mortar. If you want to be able to create some of those next level gravity-defying aquascapes with huge overhangs, large arches, tall pedestals, or even if you want to make a simple aquascape but make sure that it never comes apart, falls down, tumbles, or anything like that, then this is exactly what you're looking for. E-Marco 400 is basically going to turn it into one giant piece of rock, solid. Also, I'm going to show you some tips on how to use it. One of my absolute favorite parts of starting a new reef tank is aquascaping and creating that rock work that acts as a foundation for my corals to build on, while also being a safe haven for my fish and inverts, and ultimately just sets the stage for my reef tank. There are lots of considerations and factors that come into play when you're aquascaping, like what kind of rock best suits your goals, what kind of corals do you want to keep and how tall are they going to grow, how close to the back glass should you keep your rock work, and what are you going to do to prevent your rocks from ever tumbling or falling down accidentally, which could, destroy your aquascape, break or damage your corals, hurt your fish, scratch your glass, or worse. MarcoRocks has an excellent solution to keep your scapes from accidentally collapsing. With a more inviting surface texture for natural coralline growth compared to epoxies and other adhesives, it comes in gray to match dry rock and pink for pigmented or coralline covered rock, and more impressively, gives you the ability to bond rocks with more than enough strength to create some nearly gravity-defying aquascapes that just aren't feasible with epoxy or superglue. E-Marco 400 mortar includes 5 pounds of mortar powder, liquid polymer, the bucket, and a spatula for mixing and applying the mortar. Plus, MarcoRocks gives you resealable bags, so anything left over you can just store and save for later. Now, before I show you how easy this is to use, here are a few tips to help you get started. Get a pair of gloves to keep your hands clean. I like to use nitrile gloves. Make sure your work surface is completely flat and cover it to keep it clean. Use a disposable plastic cup to mix small batches of mortar to give you more working time to finish your scape and to keep the bucket clean for storing leftover components for use later on. The instructions are simple. Add some water to the bag of liquid polymer and mix well. I personally prefer to use RO water for this. Then add it into the powder and mix with the spatula until you reach the right consistency. It can take a little practice to get it just right, so I recommend going slow at first. Adding very small amounts of powder if it's too wet or liquid if it's too dry, so you don't accidentally pass over that sweet spot. Once you've mixed it up, you can then apply it to the various contact points between the rocks in your aquascape. You've got about 15 minutes to work with it before it sets, and after 2 hours or so, you can confidently move your structure or add onto it. Personally, I'd wait the full 24 hours before lifting up any really heavy or elaborate structures. That way you know it's completely solid. A few tips for when you're working with mortar: it isn't as fast setting as superglue or epoxy, and it won't stick the rocks together while you're working with it wet. So if you have a tall aquascape or lots of contact points, it usually works best to do it a few rocks at a time, let it set, and then continue building on top of it. If you want to make some of those gravity-defying overhangs, you'll want to use cardboard, PVC pipe, or even other spare pieces of rock to support it while it fully dries. For particularly long, crazy overhangs, give it the full 24 hours before adding onto it. And remember, it is permanent and extremely strong once it's fully cured. In fact, if you were to try to pry 2 rocks apart held together with E-Marco mortar, you're more likely to break the rock than the bond itself. So it's a really good idea to make sure you take your time, plan out your aquascape so it looks exactly the way you want it, and then use the E-Marco 400 to make sure it stays that way. So before you start aquascaping and piecing together your rock work, save yourself a ton of hassle and regret and watch Ryan and Randy's video on their top 23 aquascaping mistakes. Number 11 is something that I've personally been doing for years without even thinking about it. It's really interesting when you think about all the small little decisions you make while aquascaping that affect the tank long term. So well after you're done, corals are in, you look back and you think, oh, I wish I did that differently. Don't be that person. Watch the video. It's a lifesaver.